Good evening from the Raeburn lab, everybody. Fantastic. I think we are up and running. We've got a few waves. Fantastic. So we're starting nice and early and so glad to see everyone joining. Absolutely brilliant. Fantastic. So I wanted first just to be saying how happy I am to be back in the Raeburn lab. So I'm just going to give you guys a little tour around. The really cool news is that we are now getting ready for the public again. So really excited to say that next weekend you'll be more than welcome to join the Raeburn lab and to come and meet myself and meet the team. And we really can't wait to be back. So super exciting on that score. And I'm so proud that today, of course, as part of London Fashion Week, which of course now is all gone digital, we are absolutely privileged to be joined by Dylan Jones. So really exciting. We're going to be unpacking everything about the reset or restart for the industry, what that might mean, and yeah, really looking forward to hearing Dylan's perspective. So with that, I'm going to just give a little tour again of the lab, and just to say for anyone that's joined a little bit late, please do come and join us next week. Can't wait to be back open to the public and doing what we do well. So all about remade, reduced, recycled. And of course, our new project, RÆFOUND. So hopefully, see there that the lab's looking nice and tidy as well, some great comments coming in. So hopefully we are going to be joined by Dylan, who with a bit of luck will be joining us any second. So we're going to hopefully see Dylan joining. This is always the awkward bit, of course. So Dylan, I know you're looking. Hopefully you can then give the option just to connect as well. So we can maybe do this the other way around as well. So I can't see Dylan asking to join, but I know he's watching. So I'm going to scan through and see if we can find Dylan. Not at the moment. Fantastic. Well, because we're nice and early anyway, we're just going to wait for a sec and explain a little bit more about what we're doing. We can see the numbers are going up as well. Brilliant to see the comments as well, and just to say that this is really all about the audience as well as myself and Dylan speaking. So yeah, super glad that everyone's being able to join, and we're already seeing a few questions as well and people coming in, which is great. And here we go. We've got the request from Dylan to join, so we are live. And we're waiting for Dylan to connect, which is super exciting. And there we go, Dylan. How about that?
Hey.
The wonders of modern technology.
How are you?
Really well, thanks. You had me worried for a minute there, but so glad to see you.
I'm here.
Wow, fantastic.
Live and direct.
Wonderful. And where is here?
I'm in my house. I'm in study in my house just off Marble Arch.
Wonderful. Fantastic. So Dylan, obviously I know quite a bit about you, but it'll be brilliant to hear from your good self a little bit about your history and just really your place within the industry, remembering that we might have some guys and girls maybe that are a little bit younger and maybe aren't, yeah, can't wait to hear all about you basically.
Younger than you?
A little bit. Pretty easy these days.
I went to Chelsea School of Art, then I went to St Martin's School of Art, then was a fantastically unsuccessful photographer for about 8 years. And then I joined ID Magazine, became editor of ID Magazine, then was an editor at The Face, then edited Arena. So I spent most of my 80s working for what at the time were incredibly influential style magazines. And then I spent most of the 90s working in newspapers. I worked for The Observer. I had various staff positions at the Sunday Times. And then just before the millennium, 20 years ago, I went to work for Condé Nast, where I have been ever since, and it's been a fantastic journey. And then about 9 years ago, the brilliant Caroline Rush asked me if I had any interest in helping her set up what became London Collections Men, and then London Fashion Week Men, and now Fashion Week. And that's been an incredible ride because it's been fantastically successful. And it was principally done because there was such an extraordinary generation of young talent, and I include you in that.
Thank you.
we thought that that generation deserved more than what was presently on offer. So there we are. That's me.
Amazing. I mean, just to note on London Collections menswear, you know, for me, I studied at the Royal College, and I came out, and sort of midway through the 2000s and beyond, there genuinely wasn't really that much for menswear at all. You know, there was one day stuck on the end of London Fashion Week in December and January, and it just didn't stack up. So I think what you introduced there, it was a real game changer. And certainly the way that it benefited us as a business, and I think a sort of cohort that came through at that time, you know, it's absolutely fantastic. So yeah, just a big thank you for that. But
it was common sense. I think the way things had worked previously, I think that menswear had been diminished. And if you consider that menswear now is on a par with women's wear in terms of its contribution to GDP. Not this year, but then that's why we are where we are.
Yeah. So before we kind of jump into things, really, I mean, how have the last 3 months been for you personally? And obviously with GQ and just the sort of complete turnaround for all of us, and this kind of new normal that we're in all of a sudden.
Well, we continue as we've always done. The team have been absolutely magnificent. We've moved all our event business to the autumn. Men of the Year, GQ Heroes, Food and Drink Awards, Grooming Awards, etc., etc. Our website continues to punch above its weight. But I think if you have any kind of website at the moment in news or entertainment and you're not doing well, you're probably doing something wrong. And we're still publishing magazines. We've published 3 magazines under lockdown. We have organized Zoom calls 3 times a day, the entire team, and things are going really well. Obviously, the elephant in the room is advertising, which is challenging, but it's starting to come back. And I think that when brands come back in the autumn, obviously shops here are open on Monday. I think it's going to be a very slow start, but I think that everyone needs to work together, everyone needs to partner, and everybody needs to encourage people to get back shopping. However, I think that the one thing that this lockdown has reinforced is that there's no point shopping for shopping's sake. And I think that some of the things that you've done, some of the things that we've seen over the last couple of days, some of the things we'll see later, some of the things we'll see tomorrow have harnessed. You'll see that the designers have harnessed a real sensibility about why we're shopping and what are the real incentives to buying clothes again.
Yeah, amazing. And that sort of tees things up, I think, amazingly for today's conversation. There's so much talk in the industry at the moment about the need to reset or a need to start, and maybe how that might happen and what that looks like. But just for the audience, I mean, fundamentally, what we do as an industry, in my perspective, doesn't make sense. We end up doing all of these collections that we deliver. For example, a spring collection was sort of a demand to deliver that pre-Christmas, or certainly very early in January. You then consider that it's spring products and it's actually the coldest months through January, February, March. Then all of a sudden it sort of goes on sale before it gets warm, really often. And then you flip it around. You sort of do the same on the other side with winter products. And I think, you know, it's obviously, I mean, from my perspective, as I say, fundamentally flawed. And all of a sudden, we've had this stop and this pause, and I think an obligation to really rethink what the future might look like. And take it in the right way. You're a veteran, right? You know, with the amount of experience that you have, and you've seen decades of fashion kind of come and go. But do you think this is sort of different? Do you think this is really going to see a big change? Do you think, in terms of next steps, what?
I think it's huge.
What's evolving?
it's been seismic, and I think that there are two issues here. There's the incentive to buy from consumers. What do consumers want? Why do they want it? When do they want it? And also the whole of how clothes are shown and sold to the public. And as you say, there have been countless discussions over the last couple of years of how we reorganize Fashion Week, how we look at the supply chain, stopping sales happen when they shouldn't, actually being able to go into a shop and buy a shirt when you're going on holiday instead of having to buy an overcoat, all of this. But I think that what the last 3 months has done, it's forced people's hands to really address what they're doing. And I think it's forced all of us to think, what do we do when we go to work? What are we producing and why are we producing it? And what's the easiest route to market? I mean, for years, the wholesale retail model has been broken because of e-commerce. And lots of people are having huge success with that. And I think that if you haven't had that as part of your portfolio, or at least successfully, the last couple of months has taught you that you really need to amplify that. But also, apart from the sort of existential issue, I think, yes, there are real problems with the way that this industry works, not least because I think that what's happened over the last few days, the brilliant BSC team have put on this fantastic platform, but I think more the designers and the brands have been incredibly inventive in the way that they've used it. So that regardless of what changes, regardless of what happens when we go back to having live shows and live presentations, this has not only shown that there's a different way to engage with people, but it's also flipped the model. Because for years, fashion was all about B2B. It was all about elitism. It was all about exclusivity. And actually, if you consider that what's happened in this country in the last 30 years, it's all about exactly the opposite of that. It's about inclusivity. It's about showing people how to get things that they previously couldn't. It's about the democratization of fashion. It's about egalitarian. And I think that this digital fashion week has shown a way forward. I mean, I'm very closely involved with the Hay Festival, which is the world's biggest literary festival, and I'm the chair of that. And because obviously we couldn't have a festival this year, apart from the huge financial problems which that caused us, we decided to put on a digital literary festival, which was basically 100 events where people are being interviewed on Zoom. And we did this almost as a way to sort of fill the 10 days, as a way to encourage all the people that may have come to Hay and all the writers and the publishers to engage with the brand. And actually turned out to be phenomenally successful. It was all free.
So I read you had over 500,000 sort of interactions, views, everyone actually getting involved, right?
And it showed that this is a really interesting model going forward in terms of commercial partners and sponsorship, but it also opened up the Hay Festival to the world, because most of those 500,000 views were outside the UK. They were global. And I think that that's what London Fashion Week in a digital format has shown, is that this is for everyone. And what you want to do as a designer is sell your merchandise. Fashion weeks are meant to help. They're meant to be a platform, and they're meant to amplify that. And you're meant to pivot from that. But if you can do that through digital, if we can help in a digital sphere, then surely that's better for everyone. You've got to interrupt me, Chris, because I would just talk forever.
No. I mean, it's fascinating, Dylan, and it sort of, for me, it provokes a few different questions. One is around, how do we make sure this isn't just lip service at the moment? Because all of a sudden, all of these brands, designers, everyone's questioning, quite rightly, what the next step is. Everyone's testing all of these different routes, but then, you know, the idea for me of going back to normal scares the hell out of me, because it didn't make sense then, and it's sure as hell not going to make sense in the future. So I suppose that's just a sort of fear that I have. And when I think about Raeburn and the fact that, scarily, the first remade jacket I did actually was at Middlesex University. It'll be the 20th anniversary next year. So you've been at GQ 20 years. All of a sudden, that was actually when I made my first remade jacket. And again, for me, it just made sense. Pragmatic approach to design, and yeah, I suppose that's just the fear in all of this, that we do need to see real systemic change, I think, and it's not just about you know, one collection for me or one season. You know, I think it's such a raft of different considerations. You mentioned supply chain earlier. You mentioned, I think we all need to work on this together. And I suppose the question I put back to you, in such a pivotal place within the press, is how do you see your role? You know, because I think you're right to say that the designers have a platform through London Fashion Week, but then how does the press support in all that? So Dylan's just started spinning a little, which is always good fun. Hopefully he'll rejoin in a second. Oh, Dylan, we lost you for a second there. It was halfway through a different. Yeah, amazing. So we lost you for a second, but the question really was that.
Oh, I had to go and have a lie down, but I'm back now.
The question was around, all of a sudden the designers have this platform, but I put it back to you as well, that with the press, you also have this obligation, I think, right, to hopefully help to push this forward, right? Well, so how do we work on this together?
Yes, there needs to be systemic change, but only if you want it. And I think that what yesterday and today and tomorrow will show that there is an alternative to the regular way of performing and showing during Fashion Week. I mean, there are lots of fantastic designers in this country and lots of fantastic designers who show during Fashion Week. But in the weeks leading up to Fashion Week, I'm often encouraging designers not to show, to do something different, because everyone's obsessed with having this starburst moment of having a catwalk moment or a presentation moment or a party or a this one or a that one. And that's all great for PR, but it costs a lot of money. And if you can circumvent that, if your route to market is slightly more unorthodox, although I think it's becoming very orthodox in a digital sense, then people should do that. And it's basically amplifying your creativity. Because I think that what this country has over and above Paris, Milan, New York, Beijing, any other fashion week, it has such an innate sense of creativity. And I think why you've seen over the last couple of days, designers and brands being really inventive. Because I think that everyone was looking at a digital fashion week and thinking, well, what the hell is that going to be like? But I think everyone who's tuned in for the last couple of days has been pleasantly surprised.
It's great to hear. I mean, do you think then the future of all of this will still be about how we find that right bridge and balance between digital and physical, ultimately, and continue to sort of test and learn? But do you think we're going to go back to that sort of very formulaic and now, for me, very old-fashioned model? And I say that having done catwalk shows, but the idea of men and women just walking up and down a straight runway.
I think it's many things. I think this that we will there will be more options for people. And I think that the fundamental thing is the thing that I've missed in the last couple of months is meeting people, is talking to people, is actually being with people. And I think that's a fundamental part of any industry. But more importantly than any of that is what you're doing. It's like, what do you want to do? Do you want to have a catwalk show? Do you want to do something in a digital space? Do you want to do nothing at all? I mean, what you've done in the last couple of months is really interesting. I mean, I think you should tell everyone about RÄFOUND and what you've been up to.
Oh, yeah. No, thanks, Tim. I'm going to ask, the point with this as well is partially welcoming questions from the audience as we go through. So before I jump into RÆFOUND, I am just going to ask one that we had from Jigglypuff for you, asking actually about before, yes, so essentially how does Dylan Jones feel about the return to working life when lockdown is lifted? Actually, it's a very, I guess, GQ and Dylan specific thing before we jump into RÆFOUND.
I've always been very, very suspicious of people who wanted to work from home. I mean, incredibly suspicious. I just haven't allowed it.
Yeah.
But as I say, my team have been absolutely magnificent. And I think that even though it stymies creativity, I think working on Zoom is incredibly efficient. I think in terms of process, it's a really good way of working. And if some people have difficult commutes and some people don't want to come back to the office because fear of infection, and I think that people want to work in silos, I think all of these things are possible. I think it will free things up. A lot of anxiety at the moment, and I really don't think we're going to be back to any sort of normalcy, certainly not this year, possibly next year. But yeah, I suppose the short answer to that question is that I've become a little less authoritarian.
That's great to hear. So RÆFOUND,
up to, come on.
Yeah, so RÆFOUND is our it's our provocation, if you will, as part of London Fashion Week. And what we've introduced is a new capsule of products. You can see some of the pieces behind me here. Items like this, for example, beautiful pilots, vests, etc. The Gore-Tex that you see here, seam-sealed pieces. All of what you're looking at here, and in fact what I'm wearing, they're original unissued military pieces in full size sets.
Fantastic.
And the provocation I have for the industry is, what could be more radical than making nothing at all?
Yeah.
And with that, Dylan's gone on to freeze. No, I thought I'd lost you for a second at the key moment, Dylan, but we've got you.
I'm back.
Fantastic. Yeah, so what could be more radical than making nothing at all? Because there's all this stuff out there, and yet we're obsessed always with the new and with manufacturing, more and more, on the assumption that somehow making more is the answer. The provocation I have for the industry is actually, let's use and work with what we've got. It's what we did first with Remade, and now with RÆFOUND, we're introducing really high quality garments, very very contemporary, all curated by me, and at an accessible price point. So it's really something we hope a little bit different. And we're teeing it up as part of London Fashion Week, and I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, I think it's a brilliant idea. Because it's you've in times of adversity, you've actually produced something of real worth, of real quality, but also the zeitgeist has sort of caught up with you because you've been doing this ever since you launched. And I remember the first time we met, like nearly possibly 9 or 10 years ago. And I remember we had a meeting and you were talking about your business structure. And I was saying that, sustainability and your sort of advocacy and your determination to do that was brilliant. But I was calling into question whether or not the sustainability issue was literally going to be through your entire company, like Brighton Rock. And to your credit, you said, yes, I'm going to live or die by this ethos. And actually, even then, people were using sustainability in a kind of greenwashing way because it was a cute word to use. Yeah, we're going to have some sustainability as well because you like that, don't you? But it was part of your DNA, and it still is. And I think it's brilliant that, as I say, in times of adversity, where it would be very easy for you to do something far more commercial, that you found a way to stick to your design principles whilst also creating what I can see a very good garment. So I think it's interesting. I think it's brilliant, and I think it's great that you stuck to your DNA. But are you going to be doing it next season?
Absolutely, yeah. This is really part of our long-term vision, and as I mentioned, part of our provocation for the industry. That whilst we're talking about military items, because of course it's our, you know, the things that are closest to my heart in terms of functionality, the truth is that there are millions of garments out there. Every year, as people, we produce close to 100 billion garments every year. And scarily, a lot of them end up in landfill. A lot of them aren't used. They're overproduced. We overconsume. We don't. So there's so much out there already that, again, if anything, I would love to say that not only are we going to be doing this season on season, but we'd love to be growing this part of our business and making less, because we still do remade, we still do reduced and recycled as part of our core line. But I would love that we're doing more of this, and that we're adding to the collection. And importantly, the cool thing for this season, we've started with European pieces, so sourced from all around UK, but then also we've got French and Dutch and Austrian, really high quality, as I mentioned. But then all of a sudden you look globally, and there's all of these other pieces out there, all with their own peculiarities and their own, kind of interests. And for the geek in me, that's super exciting, because it's almost this archaeology of going out and finding the stuff, and it's absolutely what drives me up.
Aren't you? And I think that's something that people really resonate with, because obviously fashion has inbuilt obsolescence. And I think certainly in terms of fast fashion, particularly in women's wear, and that's been incredibly destructive to the industry. It's created a lot of growth. It's created a lot of wealth, which has been great for everybody on the food chain, on the supply chain. But yes, this resetting, this reckoning, I think has come at a very opportune time. And I think the idea of working in the way that you are is very exciting. And also, I would hope, and you'll probably disagree with me, I hope you're copied. I hope people look at your model and go, let's do what that guy's doing.
Yeah, no, quite the opposite.
With frock, let's do it with training shoes. Let's do it whatever.
Yeah, absolutely, quite the opposite. I mean, what's really inspiring, and I don't say that lightly, is how many people now are doing remade. You'll see all sorts of designers, big, small brands, etc. And this was something, of course, we were pioneering through the 2000s. Also being very open that what we were doing was nothing new, because it was done through the 40s and 50s and make, do and mend and all. So again, it's pragmatism, but absolutely. The hope here is that, again, we provoke a conversation. We have some people saying, I get it. Other people saying, I don't get it. Why can't I do it myself? And what I'd like to say to them as well is, brilliant, get out there and do it yourself. The more people doing this, the better, because there's so much out there. And so, I would love the fact that, you know, I mentioned earlier, the geek in me is drawn towards this very functional stuff. Of course, everyone out there is going to have different interests. So if we can all look at this sort of scavenger way of working in the right way, then, you know, I think that we've got a real opportunity to clean up our industry, but with it, the environment and with everything else. You know, you'll probably know, but the fashion industry is the second biggest pollutant, right, after the automobile industry. You know, so that's a scary thing. So we need to make changes.
No, you're right.
And, you know, back to COVID-19 and this magnification and the fact that people are so much more aware, so much more mindful. I read an amazing stat on Google Trends that since May, people searching for, quote, how to live a more sustainable life has gone up by 4,550%.
I'm sure.
So all of a sudden, it feels to me that we've finally got this push and pull in the right place, right? Where we can really make the change.
Coming to your website as well. I think that I think in terms of an aesthetic, I think that it's really interesting, because what you're trying to do and what you're succeeding is to act with is actually making classic items. Because if you think, well, I wore this jacket 20 years ago, or this pair of trousers 20 years ago, often you think, well, I can't wear that because it's not fashionable, probably doesn't fit me, certainly doesn't fit me, etc., etc. But isn't it great to look in your wardrobe and go, I haven't worn that for ages, and you put it on and go, great, fantastic.
Yeah.
And I think that's the kind of world that we're living in at the moment, where everything doesn't have to be replaced every 5 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. It sort of becomes anti-fashion, because the very nature of fashion also, there's always this expectation for the new. And yeah, I'm sort of very proud, I think, to be just part of that space that we should continue to question, evolve, and really, yeah, work out what we're doing together. And I think that's to come kind of full circle. I do think it's the point where we all need to work together. The individual may be watching this, out there, the customer, etc., but then designers, brands, really importantly, the press. And yeah, back to the BFC, the amazing platforms that they've provided. I'm really excited actually about what the future might look like. You know, the idea, as we truly close the loop. We had a point earlier about regenerative materials, the planet and people positive materials. If we can really get to the point where we can pull all of that into an understandable and importantly workable model, which isn't easy, then all of a sudden we go from being this very detrimental and degrading industry to actually being positive. And bearing in mind how many people are employed out there, it's yeah, I think for me it's really key.
Well, that's very well put, and I think that the way that you espouse your ideals is very impressive. And I think that if you can use, as you have done, this platform to actually get the message across, I think it's great, because what you're doing is really wonderful and is exactly what people should be doing.
Yeah, we had a few quick questions just before we wrap up, Dylan, that came through that I was able to kind of catch. And one of them I think is so relevant to both of us, and I think it was from a young designer just saying, you know, how do you start out? You know, and actually I'll answer it first from the sort of Raeburn perspective. I think it's so important you do one thing well to begin with. So for example, I just did outerwear, I just did jackets made from parachutes for 5 years. Nobody remembers, let's say, beyond that. They sort of have this, yeah, even now, 11 years into business, people still go back to the parachutes, is what I'm getting at. It's really interesting. If you do one thing properly to begin with, it's instilled, and people really, that's what you remember, sort of remembered for. When I put that back to you, actually with two hats on, if you don't mind, what are you looking for when you see young designers coming through, whether it's through London Fashion Week, menswear, LCM as it was, and then with GQ as well, actually, ultimately from a press perspective?
I think you're looking for people with a point of view, and you're looking for people with genuine talent.
Yeah.
It's not rocket science in terms of what gets cut through. What has changed, I mean, that hasn't, in terms of what you're using your media or your medium or your platform for, it's always trying to celebrate young creators. But I think what's changed in the last 15 years, and something which I've certainly encouraged, and I've been quite vocal about, is the fact that, you know, day one, start a company, day two, hire an accountant, because I think that the designers now know that it doesn't matter how brilliant they are, unless you have a business model, unless you have someone working side by side, hand in hand, who can actually help you form a business, then it's kind of pointless. Everybody can be a creative, everybody can be a fashion designer, a filmmaker, a journalist, blah, blah, blah. You've got to find a way to have cut through. And actually, I would hope that things like this, which is the world's first digital fashion week, can actually show some people how to get to market in a cheaper, quicker, maybe more sustainable way than they've been able to before. Because I think you're right. The idea of exclusively going back to fashion shows behind closed doors is a very, very old-fashioned model.
Yeah, amazing. So with that, Dylan, as we start to really think about the reset and this idea really of the restart, I really enjoyed the conversation. Of course, thank you so much. But I think what you just said there is so key, that all of this, the restart, the reset, doing things in a different way, if those creatives don't have the business side, it's not going to work. So that's a really good takeaway, I think, for everyone out there. And yeah, I just want to thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chris. And good luck.
Really support. And wishing everyone well. And do please come to the Raeburn Lab once we're back open again next week. And yeah, looking forward to the continuation of London Fashion Week. Cheers, everybody.
Take care. See you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.